Nearly 6 years after the introduction of the iPad and 3 years after the iPad mini, Apple has decided to take the tablet form factor to another extreme, the iPad Pro. For the company that made the smartphone a household name with the iPhone and practically invented the tablet market with the iPad Pro feels sort of inevitable. The tablet market has slowed in recent quarters, and even though the iPad is still on top by a huge margin, the form factor feels somewhat stale. People have largely figured out whether they need a tablet and how it fits in with their lives. You get the Mini if you're mostly a reader or casual gamer. It's cheap and ultra portable. And you get the Air if you want to get some work done or play with more graphically intense games or surf the web, or you get the idea. But one thing the iPad's promise never quite fulfilled was fully replacing a laptop. It didn't support more than one app on the screen, and it lacked the kinds of apps and accessories to really get the job done, whatever that means. But then something happened. Apple released iOS 9, and developers rediscovered the iPad as a tool for real, honest-to-goodness work. That's where the iPad Pro comes into play. Available this week for $799 US or $1,049 Canadian, it may look just like a bigger iPad, but it's been designed to replace your laptop, and eventually it just might. The 12.9-inch screen has a crazy resolution of 2732 by 2048, which means that in landscape, it can fit 2 regular vertical iPad apps. The screen also has a custom timing driver that slows down the refresh rate to 30 Hz from 60 Hz when there's a static image, improving battery life. But the main thing about the display is that it can be used with the Apple Pencil, which is one of the strangest accessories the company has ever built. We'll start there because this is a tablet meant to be drawn on. If nothing else, the iPad Pro is for people who draw, who sketch, and who take meticulous handwritten notes. After using devices like the Galaxy Note 5 and the Surface Pro 4, I thought I knew what low latency input felt like, but the iPad Pro is much faster. There are going to be people who object to Apple even building a stylus after Steve Jobs' diatribe against them, but the company he left behind is a very different Apple. The technology is also much improved. Here we have hundreds of points of pressure sensitivity, as well as tilt support in myriad apps like 53's Paper and Procreate that have already been adapted for the Pencil. It feels like the least necessary of Apple's 2 new accessories, but it's also the most fun. And it charges from the iPad's Lightning port, which looks ridiculous, but you only need to charge it for a minute every few days to keep it working. Just try not to lose it, because there's nowhere to store it on the iPad itself. The absolutely necessary accessory that I mentioned is the Smart Keyboard, which doubles as a cover for the iPad Pro. At $169 US and $229 Canadian, it's not cheap, but if you want to use the iPad Pro the way Apple envisions, you should buy it. The Smart Keyboard latches using magnets, just like Apple's regular smart covers, but it engages the iPad's new smart connector for two-way power and data transfer, which means the case doesn't need to be charged separately and has no battery, allowing it to be much thinner than any Bluetooth keyboard case you could have found for the iPad yesterday. I love this keyboard. Key travel is slightly shallow, but responsiveness is incredible, and they are spaced just right. The only problem is that it places the iPad Pro at only one angle, which is slightly too upright for tabletop use, but perfect in my opinion for lap use. It's possible to use the iPad Pro without the keyboard, but you're losing a fundamental part of its soul. iOS 9 has been designed to work with 2 apps side by side, and the best use cases are for when I'm typing in one and doing something else in the other, like watching a video or tweeting. It wasn't until I myself tried to use the iPad Pro as my main computer that I realized just how easy it would be. From writing documents to editing photos to scheduling social media, whatever can't be done in an app is possible with Safari, which is insanely fast on the iPad Pro. Actually, most things are insanely fast on the iPad Pro. If you ever doubted that Apple's own silicone is just as fast as Intel's low-powered Atom chips found in the Surface, this will change your mind. The A9X chip is actually just 2 cores, down from 3 in the A8X, but they're each clocked at a sprightly 2.15 GHz. Couple that with 4 gigs of RAM and what looks like the fastest GPU currently available in a tablet, the iPad Pro can easily replace most people's laptops without a decrease in performance. There are other use cases for the iPad Pro. The screen is huge, sure, but Apple has also focused on its audio output, promising 3 times the volume and considerably more bass than the iPad Air 2. And it's when watching a video on the huge high-resolution screen without the keyboard, you realize that the iPad Pro can be the best of both worlds. Both a tablet with all of the iPad's amazing apps and a laptop with a growing number of those essential apps too. All told, the iPad Pro is an incredible piece of technology and reinforces for me that the future of portable computing is in this kind of form factor, whether you're buying it from Apple, Microsoft, or somebody else. It's a blank slate that can be built out, not the other way around. There are still some limitations in using the iPad Pro over a MacBook, but those will likely dissipate over time. And since the iPad Pro encroaches on MacBook Air's price territory, it will be interesting to see whether Apple can pull it off in convincing people that it can be their one and only computer.